The wind howled like a wounded animal across the frozen wasteland of Oymyakon, the coldest inhabited place on Earth. -72 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, your breath freezes before it leaves your lips. At that temperature, exposed skin dies in minutes. At that temperature, most people don't survive the night. But Katya Volkov had survived 49 winters in this unforgiving land. She stood at the frosted window of her small wooden cabin, watching the darkness swallow the last hint of daylight at 3 in the afternoon. The glass was so cold that ice crystals bloomed across its surface like deadly flowers, beautiful and lethal at the same time. Her hands, rough and scarred from years of chopping wood and hauling water, trembled slightly as she pulled her wool shawl tighter around her shoulders. Not from the cold. She was used to the cold. It was the loneliness that made her tremble. 3 years. 3 years since Victor had gone out to check the traps and never came back. They found him 2 days later, frozen solid beneath a collapsed snowbank, his eyes still open, staring at a sky that had shown him no mercy. The villagers said she should leave. Move to Yakutsk, they said. Find warmth, they said. Find life. But Katya couldn't leave. This cabin, this frozen hell, it was all she had left of him. Every log in these walls, Victor had cut with his own hands. Every nail, he had hammered with love. To leave would be to abandon his memory. So she stayed? Alone. The kettle whistled on the wood stove, pulling her from her thoughts. She poured herself a cup of tea, strong and black, the way Victor used to make it, and sat at the small wooden table that dominated the center of the room. The silence was suffocating. Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, the fire crackled. And between those two sounds, nothing. Just her heartbeat. Just her breath. Just the crushing weight of solitude. She was raising the cup to her lips when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A sound that made her freeze. Knock, knock, knock. Slow. Deliberate. Weak. Someone was at her door. At -72 degrees. At 9 o'clock at night. In the middle of nowhere. Katya's heart hammered against her ribs. Nobody traveled at night in this cold. Nobody was foolish enough to be out in this weather. Not unless they were dying. She moved to the door, her hand hesitating on the iron handle. Every instinct screamed at her to be careful. Strangers were rare in Oymyakon. Strangers at night were unheard of. But the knock came again, weaker this time. And she heard something that made her blood run cold. A voice. Barely a whisper. Please! Her hand moved before her mind could stop it. She threw open the door, and a blast of Arctic air hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. And there, collapsed against her doorframe, was a man. He was tall, or had been, before the cold had bent him double. His face was hidden beneath a fur hood crusted with ice, his clothes were torn and inadequate for the Siberian winter, and his hands. God, his hands were blue. Help! He whispered, and then his eyes rolled back in his head. He fell forward, and Katya barely caught him, his weight nearly driving her to her knees. For one terrible moment, she thought he was already dead. But then she felt it, the faintest flutter of breath against her cheek. He was alive. Barely. With strength born of desperation, Katya dragged him inside and kicked the door shut against the murderous cold. The man was heavy, solid muscle beneath the frozen clothes, and she struggled to get him to the rug in front of the fire. His skin was like ice. His lips were purple. Hypothermia. Severe. She'd seen it before. She knew what it meant. He had minutes. Maybe less. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, the muscle memory of a woman who had lived in the cold all her life. She peeled away his frozen outer layers, a thin jacket that was laughable in this climate, a torn shirt underneath, cheap boots that had let in the snow. Who was this man? What was he doing out here? Questions for later. Right now, she needed to save his life. She wrapped him in every blanket she owned, rubbing his arms and legs to get the blood flowing. She heated water on the stove and soaked cloths, pressing them gently to his hands and feet, the most dangerous areas for frostbite. His face, now visible in the firelight, was younger than she'd expected. Maybe 35, maybe 40. Strong jaw, dark stubble, a scar above his left eyebrow. Handsome, in a rugged sort of way. But it was his expression that caught her attention. Even unconscious, even half-dead, he looked haunted. Like a man running from something. She worked through the night, feeding the fire, changing the warm compresses, checking his pulse every few minutes. Outside, the temperature continued to drop. Inside, the cabin became a small island of warmth in a frozen ocean. Around 3 in the morning, his eyes fluttered open. They were gray, the color of storm clouds, and filled with confusion. Where? His voice was a rasp, barely audible. You're safe, Katia said quietly, her own voice rusty from disuse. You're in my cabin. In Oymyakon. His eyes widened. Oymyakon. He tried to sit up, panic flashing across his face. No. I need to. I can't. You can't do anything right now except rest, Katia said firmly, pressing him back down. You nearly froze to death. Another 10 minutes out there and you'd be dead. He stared at her, and something in his expression shifted. The panic faded, replaced by something else. Resignation, maybe? Or relief. Why did you help me? He asked. The question surprised her. Because you were dying. You don't know me. I could be dangerous. Katia looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth. He wasn't dangerous. He was broken. So could I, she replied softly. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Two strangers, brought together by chance and cold, sitting in a tiny cabin at the edge of the world. My name is Mikhail, he said finally. Katia. He nodded slowly, his eyes drifting closed again. Thank you, Katia. His breathing evened out, and he slept. Katia sat back, exhaustion washing over her. The fire crackled. The wind howled. And for the first time in 3 years, the cabin didn't feel quite so empty. Morning came late in Oymyakon. The sun, when it finally dragged itself above the horizon around 10 a.m., was weak and pale, a ghost of its summer self. It cast long shadows across the snow, turning the world into a study of white and gray. Katia woke in her chair by the fire, her neck stiff and aching. For a moment, she thought she dreamed it all. Then she looked down and saw him. Mikhail, still wrapped in her blankets, still breathing, still alive. He'd made it through the night. That alone was a miracle. She stood slowly, her joints protesting, and added more wood to the fire. The cabin was cold, it was always cold, but tolerable. She moved quietly, not wanting to wake him, and started preparing a simple breakfast. Oatmeal. Tea. A precious slice of bread. She was stirring the pot when she heard him stir behind her. You're still here, he said, his voice stronger than the night before. It's my cabin, Katia replied without turning around. Where else would I be? A pause. Then a sound that might have been a laugh. Fair point. She heard him sit up, heard the blankets rustle. When she finally turned, he was upright, his back against the wall, looking around the cabin with careful eyes. He was assessing, she realized. Looking for exits. Checking for weapons. Old habits, maybe? Or survival instincts. How are you feeling? She asked. Like I was flash frozen and then thawed out, he said honestly. But alive. Thanks to you. She ladled oatmeal into 2 bowls and brought them to the table. Sit. Eat. He moved slowly, pain evident in every movement, but he made it to the table. Up close, in the daylight, she could see the damage more clearly. His hands were bandaged, she'd done that while he slept, and his face was wind-burned, the skin raw and red. But he would heal. Probably. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the scrape of spoons against bowls and the crackle of the fire. Finally, Mikhail spoke. I suppose you want to know what I was doing out there. Katia considered. Did she want to know? Part of her was curious. Part of her was afraid. Only if you want to tell me, she said finally. He looked surprised. Most people would demand answers. I'm not most people. No, he agreed quietly. You're not. He ate another spoonful of oatmeal, then set down his spoon. His gray eyes met hers, and she saw the war happening behind them, the battle between the need to share and the instinct to hide. Trust won. Barely. I was running, he said simply. Katya waited. From Moscow. From my life. From everything. He rubbed his face with one bandaged hand. I was a prosecutor. 10 years in the Moscow criminal courts. I put away murderers, thieves, corrupt officials. He trailed off, and Katya could fill in the rest. And then you went after someone powerful, she said quietly. His eyes snapped to hers. How did you? It's an old story, she said. Told in different ways, in different places. But always the same ending. The righteous man who stands up to corruption, and loses everything. Mikhail laughed, but there was no humor in it. I didn't just lose everything. I was given a choice. Drop the case, or drop dead. When I refused. He touched the scar above his eyebrow. Let's just say the message became clearer. So you ran. So I ran. East. As far east as I could get. Away from Moscow, away from the people who wanted me dead, away from the man I used to be. He looked around the cabin, at the frost on the windows, at the simple wooden walls. I thought I could disappear out here. Start over. But the cold doesn't care who you were, Katya finished. It only cares if you can survive. Exactly. He met her eyes again. I was arrogant. Stupid. I thought I could handle it. I had a map, some supplies. I was heading for a mining settlement about 40 kilometers north. I should have made it in 2 days. But you got lost. The storm came out of nowhere. Whiteout conditions. I couldn't see 3 feet in front of me. I walked in circles for hours until I saw your light. His voice dropped. I honestly thought I was hallucinating. No one lives out here. But I stumbled toward it anyway, because what else was I going to do? Katya absorbed this. A fugitive. A wanted man. Hiding in the coldest place on earth. She should be afraid. She should turn him in. But all she felt was understanding. And now? She asked. What will you do now? Mikhail looked down at his bandaged hands. I don't know. Rest. Heal. And then, keep running, I suppose? There's nowhere safe for me. Not anymore. The bleakness in his voice was absolute. And Katya recognized it. Because she'd heard that same bleakness in her own voice for 3 years. You can stay, she heard herself say. He looked up, shock written across his face. What? You can stay. For a few days. Until you're strong enough to travel. She stood and began clearing the bowls, needing something to do with her hands. The cold will kill you if you leave now. Your frostbite needs time to heal. I can't put you in danger. Danger? Katya almost laughed. I'm a 50-year-old widow living alone at the end of the world. What danger could you possibly bring that's worse than my daily life? Mikhail stood, wincing as his frozen muscles protested. You don't understand. These people, they have reach. Resources. If they find out you helped me, then let them come, Katya said quietly, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. Let them come to Oymyakon in the dead of winter. Let them try to survive minus 72 degrees. This land will kill them long before they reach me. He stared at her, and slowly, very slowly, his expression changed. The haunted look faded. And for the first time since he'd collapsed at her door, Mikhail smiled. It transformed his face. You're serious. I don't joke about survival. He shook his head, wonder in his eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll chop wood, Katya replied, turning back to the stove. Say you'll help me haul water from the well. Say you'll make yourself useful while you're here. I can do that. Good. She paused, then added softly. And Mikhail? While you're here, you don't have to run. Not from me. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't empty. It was full. Full of possibility. Full of something Katya hadn't felt in 3 long years. Hope. 3 days passed like a strange dream. Mikhail healed faster than Katya expected. The frostbite on his hands and feet was painful but not severe. He'd been lucky. Another hour in that cold and he would have lost fingers. As it was, he could work. And work he did. True to his word, Mikhail threw himself into the daily tasks of survival with an intensity that surprised her. He chopped wood until his bandaged hands bled through the cloth. He hauled water from the well, each bucket a battle against the cold. He repaired the roof where snow had damaged the shingles, working in the brutal temperatures with grim determination. Katya watched him and saw something she recognized. He was punishing himself. Or maybe, trying to prove his worth. You don't have to destroy yourself to earn your keep, she told him on the 3rd evening as they sat by the fire. Mikhail looked up from the rope he was repairing, another task he'd assigned himself. I'm not. Yes, you are. Katya set down her mending. I can see it. Every log you chop, every bucket you haul, you're trying to balance some scale in your head. Pay me back for saving your life. He was quiet for a long moment. Then softly, maybe I am. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything, he said, and there was no arguing with the conviction in his voice. You took in a stranger. Risked your life to save mine. And you asked for nothing in return? In Moscow, people don't do that. Everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle. This isn't Moscow. No, he agreed, looking around the small cabin. It's not. The fire crackled between them, warm and bright. Outside, the wind had died down, a rare moment of peace in the Siberian winter. Tell me about him, Mikhail said suddenly. Katya looked up. Who? The man who built this cabin. Your husband. She should have expected the question. The cabin was full of Victor's presents, his tools hanging on the wall, his jacket still on its hook by the door, his books stacked neatly on the shelf. But it still hurt to talk about. His name was Victor, she said finally. Victor Volkov. We married when I was 20, he was 22. Everyone said we were too young. Too poor. That we'd never survive out here. But you did. We did. A small smile touched her lips. Victor was stubborn. Impossibly stubborn. He believed that if you worked hard enough, if you loved deeply enough, you could build a life anywhere. Even here. Even at the coldest place on earth. He sounds like a good man. He was the best man. Her voice cracked slightly. For 30 years we lived in this cabin. We struggled. We suffered. We froze and starved and wondered if we'd make it through another winter. But we had each other. And that was enough. Mikhail waited, sensing there was more. 3 years ago, there was a storm. Worse than usual. Victor went out to check our traps, we needed the food. I begged him not to go, but he insisted. He said he'd be back in an hour. Her hands clenched in her lap. He never came back. I'm sorry. The search party found him 2 days later. The cold had taken him so fast, he probably didn't even feel it. That's what they told me. That it was quick. Painless. She laughed bitterly. As if that makes it hurt less. Mikhail set down the rope and moved closer, sitting on the floor by her chair. And you stayed. After he died. Where else would I go? This cabin is all I have left of him. His sweat is in these walls. His dreams are in every board and beam. To leave would be to abandon him. Mikhail finished quietly. Yes. They sat in silence, the weight of shared grief settling over them like snow. I had a daughter, Mikhail said suddenly. Katya looked down at him in surprise. Anna. She was 6 when she died. His voice was flat, carefully controlled. Leukemia. We fought it for 2 years. Sold everything we had to pay for treatments. But in the end, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. My wife blamed me, he continued. Said I should have done more. Should have found better doctors. Should have saved her. He laughed, a broken sound. As if I hadn't torn myself apart trying. We divorced a year later. And I threw myself into work. Into cases. Into anything that would stop me from thinking about the little girl I couldn't save. Katia reached down and placed her hand on his shoulder. He flinched at first, then leaned into the touch. We're a pair, aren't we? He said. Two broken people hiding at the end of the world. Maybe, Katia said softly. Or maybe we're two survivors who refuse to give up. Mikhail looked up at her, and in his gray eyes she saw something shift. The walls he'd built around himself, they were cracking. I haven't talked about Anna in 5 years, he whispered. I couldn't. It hurt too much. And now? Now, it still hurts. But somehow, here, with you, it feels like maybe I can breathe around the pain. Katia understood. Oh, how she understood. For 3 years she'd carried Victor's memory like a stone around her neck, drowning under the weight of it, unable to speak his name without breaking. But sitting here, in the firelight, sharing her grief with a stranger who understood, it felt like the stone was a little lighter. We're allowed to survive them, you know, she said quietly. The people we've lost. We're allowed to keep living. Are we? Mikhail's voice was raw with doubt. We have to be. Katia squeezed his shoulder. Because the alternative is letting the cold take us too. And I don't think Victor would want that for me. Just like I don't think Anna would want that for you. Mikhail closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were wet. Thank you, he breathed. They didn't talk much more that night. But as Katia lay in her bed, the first time in 3 years she'd let someone else take the floor by the fire, she felt something she thought was dead. Connection. Human connection. And it terrified her as much as it thrilled her. Because in 7 more days, Mikhail would be strong enough to leave. And then she'd be alone again. The thought was unbearable. The routine they fell into was comfortable, almost too comfortable. Mornings meant chores. Mikhail would wake first, stoke the fire, and start breakfast while Katia prepared for the day. They'd eat together in companionable silence, then tackle the endless work of survival in the Siberian winter. Afternoons were for projects. Mikhail fixed things around the cabin that had been broken for years. A loose door hinge, a drafty window, a shelf that had pulled away from the wall. Katia taught him how to properly preserve food, how to read the weather and the color of the sky, how to survive in a place that wanted you dead. Evenings were for stories. And stories were dangerous. Because with every story, they learned more about each other. With every shared memory, the walls came down a little further. With every laugh and every tear, the space between them grew smaller. It was evening on the 8th day when things changed. They were sitting by the fire as usual, Mikhail carving a piece of wood with Victor's old knife, Katia working on a torn coat. The wind was howling outside. A blizzard had rolled in that afternoon, blanketing the world in white. You're getting good at that, Katia observed, nodding at the carving. Mikhail held up the piece, a bird, mid-flight, surprisingly detailed. My father taught me. Before he died. He said a man should be able to create with his hands, not just destroy. Wise man. He was. Mikhail set down the carving and the knife. He would have liked you. The comment caught Katia off guard. Would he? You're strong. Honest. You don't pretend to be something you're not. Mikhail's gray eyes met hers across the fire. You're real in a way most people aren't. Heat that had nothing to do with the fire crept up Katia's neck. I'm just a woman trying to survive. You're more than that. His voice was soft but intense. You saved my life, Katia. Not just from the cold. From myself. These past 8 days. I've felt more alive than I have in years. Katia's hand stilled on the coat. Mikhail. I know I should leave. he continued, words tumbling out like he'd been holding them back too long. I know I'm putting you at risk just by being here. But the thought of walking out that door, of going back to running, of never seeing you again. He stopped, chest heaving. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. I'm 50 years old, Katia said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been alone for 3 years. I've forgotten how to be with someone. And I'm a wanted man with nothing to offer but danger and a past I can't escape. Mikhail stood, began to pace. This is insane. We barely know each other. It's only been 8 days. 8 days. 8 days can be a lifetime when you're living on borrowed time. He stopped pacing and looked at her. Really looked at her. And Katia saw in his eyes what she was feeling. Fear. Hope. Desire. Confusion. All tangled together like frozen branches. What are we doing? Mikhail asked hoarsely. I don't know, Katia admitted. But I know that for the first time since Victor died. I don't feel alone. And that terrifies me. Why? Because you'll leave. The words came out harder than she intended. You have to leave. You can't stay here forever, hiding in my cabin. Eventually you'll go, back to running, back to your life, back to whatever comes next. And I'll be alone again. Except this time. This time it will hurt more, Mikhail finished. Because now you'll know what you're missing. Yes. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt in front of her chair, taking her rough, work-worn hands in his bandaged ones. Then let me stay. Katia's heart stuttered. What? Let me stay. Not for a few days. Not until I'm healed. Stay, for as long as you'll have me. His voice was fierce, desperate. I have nothing, Katia. No home, no future, no plan. But I have these 2 hands and the will to work. Let me help you. Let me try to build something here. They'll find you eventually. Maybe. Maybe not. Moscow is 3,000 miles away. These people, they're powerful, but they're not gods. And they're certainly not equipped to come after me here, in the coldest place on earth. He squeezed her hands. You said it yourself? Let them come. The land will kill them first. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. His gray eyes burned into hers. Life is short, Katia. Brutally, terrifyingly short. I learned that when I lost Anna. You learned it when you lost Victor. We've both been given a second chance here, a chance to stop running, stop hiding, stop living in the past. Are we really going to throw that away because we're afraid? Katia felt tears burning behind her eyes. I'm too old for this. You're 50, not 80. And I've seen you chop wood and haul water and survive in conditions that would kill men half your age. You're not too old for anything. What if we're making a mistake? Then we'll make it together. Mikhail's voice softened. And at least we won't be alone. The tears spilled over, hot against her frozen cheeks. Because he was right. God help her, he was right. She'd been so afraid of being hurt again, of losing someone again, that she'd locked herself away in this cabin with her grief. But grief wasn't living. It was just slowly freezing to death. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I, Mikhail admitted. Terrified. But I'm more scared of walking away from this, from you, than I am of anything else. Katia looked down at their joined hands. His were larger, scarred differently, but marked by the same life of hard work and harder losses. They were a match. Stay, she breathed. What? Stay. Louder now, more certain. Stay with me, Mikhail. For as long as you want. For as long as you can. Just stay. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, rare and precious in this frozen land. I will, he promised. I will. And when he leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and careful and full of wonder, Katia felt something she thought had died with Victor. She felt alive. Spring came slowly to Oymyakon. It didn't arrive all at once, the way it did in warmer places. No sudden burst of flowers or rush of green. Here, spring was measured in degrees, in the temperature slowly creeping from -70 to -50, then -30, then finally, blessedly, above zero. It was May when Katia woke to the sound of dripping water. The ice on the windows was melting. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to that impossible sound, a smile spreading across her face. Beside her, Mikhail stirred, his arm tightening around her waist. "Is that?" His voice was rough with sleep. "It's melting," she confirmed, wonder in her voice. Spring is actually coming. They'd survived the winter. Together. It hadn't been easy. There had been days when the cold was so severe that they couldn't leave the cabin at all, huddled by the fire for warmth. Days when the blizzards raged for 72 hours straight, and they wondered if the cabin would hold. Days when supplies ran low and they went to bed hungry. But they'd survived. More than survived. They'd thrived. Mikhail had thrown himself into improving the cabin with the same intensity he'd once applied to his legal cases. He'd reinforced the walls, improved the insulation, built a better chimney that drew the smoke more efficiently. He'd expanded their trapping range, bringing in more food. He'd even started a small carpentry business, carving and selling pieces to the few other hardy souls who lived in the region. Katia, for her part, had rediscovered parts of herself she'd thought were lost. She laughed again. She sang while she worked. She looked forward to tomorrow instead of dreading it. And she loved. Oh, how she loved. It wasn't the same as her love for Victor. How could it be? Victor had been her first love, her young love, her bright and burning passion. What she felt for Mikhail was different. Deeper, maybe? Harder one. Built on shared survival and mutual respect and the knowledge that life was precious and fleeting. They understood each other in a way few people ever did. Both broken. Both healing. Both refusing to give up. "What are you thinking?" Mikhail asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That I'm happy," Katia said simply. "For the first time in 3 years. I'm happy." "Me too." He pulled her closer. "I never thought I'd say that again. After Anna, after everything. I thought happiness was something that happened to other people. Not to me. Never to me. And now? Now I wake up every morning next to you and I think, maybe I get another chance. Maybe we both do." They lay there as the cabin warmed, listening to the sounds of spring. It was Mikhail who finally broke the silence. "There's something I need to tell you." Katia's stomach clenched. Those words, they never meant anything good. "What is it?" He sat up, running a hand through his hair. He looked nervous, more nervous than she'd seen him in months. "Last week, when I went into the village for supplies, I made a phone call." Katia sat up too, pulling the blanket around her. "To who?" "An old colleague. Someone I trust." Mikhail met her eyes. "I needed to know if they were still looking for me. If it was safe." Her heart was pounding now. "And? They're not looking anymore." He let out a long breath. "The official I was prosecuting, he's dead. Heart attack 3 months ago. And with him gone, the case fell apart. They've moved on to other targets, other battles. He laughed in disbelief. "I'm free, Katia. Actually free." She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt fear. "So you can go back," she said quietly. "Back to Moscow. Back to your old life." "No." The word was immediate, fierce. "Never." "But you're free." "I was never free in Moscow," Mikhail interrupted. "I was trapped, in a system, in a life, in a version of myself that I hated. Here, with you, this is the first time I've actually been free. But your career, your friends, are nothing compared to this." He took her hands. "Katia, listen to me. I don't want to go back. I want to stay here. With you. In this cabin. In this frozen, impossible, beautiful place. If you'll have me." "Have you?" Katia felt tears pricking her eyes. "Mikhail, you've been here for 5 months. You've fixed my cabin, shared my bed, become part of my life. Of course I'll have you. Then marry me. The words hung in the air between them. What? Marry me, he repeated, and now she could see he was shaking. I know we're too old for this. I know we've only known each other for 5 months. I know it's crazy and impulsive and probably a terrible idea. But Katia, I love you. I love you in a way I didn't think I was capable of anymore. And I want to spend whatever time I have left on this earth waking up next to you. Katia couldn't speak. Her throat was closed. Her heart was too full. You don't have to answer now, Mikhail said quickly. I know it's a lot. I know you're still mourning Victor. I would never ask you to forget him or… Yes. He stopped. What? Yes, Katia said, tears streaming down her face now. Yes, I'll marry you, you ridiculous man. Yes. The joy that lit up his face was incandescent. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, and she held him back just as fiercely. I love you, she whispered into his shoulder. I didn't think I could love again after Victor. I thought that part of me was frozen forever. But you thawed me out. You brought me back to life. We brought each other back, Mikhail corrected, pulling back to look at her. Neither of us could have done this alone. He was right. They'd saved each other. Not from the cold, they'd both survived the cold before. They'd saved each other from loneliness. From grief. From the slow death of giving up. 2 weeks later, they were married in the small Orthodox church in Oymyakon, with 10 of the village's residents as witnesses. Katia wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself. Mikhail wore Victor's best suit, and Katia had cried when he'd asked permission, explaining that it felt right to honor the man who'd built the home they now shared. The ceremony was short, it had to be, the church was barely heated, but it was perfect. And when the priest pronounced them husband and wife, and Mikhail kissed her with all the tenderness in the world, Katia felt Victor's presence. Not with sadness. With blessing. He would have liked Mikhail, she thought. He would have approved of this stubborn, broken, beautiful man who'd stumbled into her life and refused to let her freeze to death from the inside out. The celebration that night was warm and loud and full of vodka and laughter. But eventually it was just the two of them again, walking back to their cabin under a sky full of stars. The northern lights were dancing overhead, green and purple and blue, a celebration in the heavens. Look, Mikhail breathed, stopping to stare. Katia looked up and smiled. Victor always said the northern lights were the souls of the dead, dancing for joy. Do you believe that? She squeezed his hand. Tonight? Yes. Tonight I believe he's up there, dancing. Happy for us. They stood there for a long moment, 2 figures tiny against the vast Siberian sky, holding each other against the cold. But the cold didn't feel quite so brutal anymore. Not when you had someone to share it with. Not when you had love to keep you warm. They walked the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, and when they reached the cabin, their cabin now, Mikhail swept her up in his arms and carried her over the threshold. She laughed, actually laughed, at the ridiculousness of it. We're not exactly spring chickens for this tradition, she protested. I don't care, Mikhail said, kicking the door shut behind them. I've waited my whole life to carry my wife over the threshold. Let me have this. So she let him. And later, as they lay tangled together in front of the fire, watching the flames dance and listening to the wind sing outside, Katia realized something profound. Home wasn't a place. It was a person. She'd thought home was this cabin, these walls, these memories of Victor. But home was wherever Mikhail was. Home was the sound of his laughter. Home was the warmth of his arms. Home was the knowledge that no matter how cold it got outside, inside, there was love. What are you thinking? Mikhail murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her skin. That I'm the luckiest woman alive, Katia replied honestly. That somehow, against all odds, in the coldest place on earth, I found warmth again. We found it, he corrected. Together. Together, she agreed. And as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, with the fire crackling and the northern lights dancing outside, Katia smiled. Because she'd learned something important these past months. You can survive the cold. You can survive the loneliness. You can survive the grief. But to truly live, to truly thrive, you need more than survival. You need hope. You need connection. You need love. And now, finally, she had all three. At minus 72 degrees Fahrenheit, in the coldest inhabited place on Earth, Katia Volkova had found the warmth that would never go out. The warmth of love. The warmth of home. The warmth of a second chance. Thank you for staying with Katia and Mikhail on this journey. Their story reminds us of something beautiful, something we sometimes forget in our comfortable, temperature-controlled lives. That love can bloom anywhere. That it's never too late for a second chance. That sometimes, the coldest places hide the warmest hearts. Katia was 50 years old, living alone, convinced her life was over. Mikhail was running from his past, broken and lost. But they found each other. And they found hope. If their story touched your heart, if it reminded you that it's never too late to start again, to love again, to hope again, please, don't let this moment fade. Click that subscribe button right now. Because there are more stories like this waiting for you. Stories of courage. Stories of redemption. Stories of love in the most unexpected places. And I promise you, each one will move you the way Katia and Mikhail's story moved you today. Hit that notification bell too, so you never miss when the next story drops. And if you have someone in your life who needs to hear this, someone who feels alone, or lost, or like their best days are behind them, share this video with them. Let them know that even at minus 72 degrees, even in the coldest, darkest, most impossible places, love finds a way. Thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling. Thank you for believing in second chances. Until next time, stay warm, my friends. Not just in body, but in heart.